Hey everyone, welcome to Dr. Sleep. We love creating unique content for you, but we need your support now more than ever. Our channel is facing some challenges, and we really need your interaction. If you enjoy what we offer, please subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share our videos with your friends. Every comment, like, and share makes a huge difference. Let's grow together and keep bringing you the content you care about. Thank you for your continued support. Josh sat on the worn leather couch in their small office, scrolling through online forums. His eyes were glued to a post filled with blurry photos of moss-covered stone stairs deep in an unmarked forest. Each photo had captions like, "Leads to nowhere," and "People who climb never return." The thread was teeming with stories. Hikers disappearing, cryptic carvings on the stones, and strange humming noises near the site. Dave leaned against the desk, sipping coffee. "All right, what do we have this time? Another haunted doll or some old graveyard?" Josh smirked. "Better. Stone stairs in the middle of nowhere. They don't lead to anything, but people swear they vanish after climbing them. There's this guy in one of the comments who said he heard screaming from the top." Dave raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite himself. "Screaming stairs, huh? Sounds promising." Josh clicked open his notepad and began jotting down details. The coordinates are deep in the woods, past the hiking trails. Locals avoid the area entirely, and the stairs supposedly shift locations. Dave frowned. "Shift? Like they move?" Josh shrugged. "That's what they say. Creepy enough for you?" Dave sighed, already packing their cameras and gear. "You know me. If it's weird, I'm in, but I swear if this turns into us chasing shadows again—" "Relax," Josh said, grinning. "This could be big. First the mansion, now this. Beyond the Veil Investigations is on a roll." They spent the next hour packing equipment, cameras, flashlights, EMF detectors, and a portable recorder. Josh double-checked their supplies, adding extra batteries and a couple of water bottles. "Last thing we need is to get lost and run out of juice." By mid-afternoon, they were driving down a dusty back road, the trees on either side growing denser the farther they went. The GPS signal flickered, and Josh switched to the handwritten directions he'd copied from the forum. "This is starting to look like the setup for every bad horror movie," Dave muttered, steering around a pothole. "Which is why people love it," Josh replied, scanning the tree line. "Urban legends like this always have some grain of truth. We just need to find it." The road ended abruptly at a weathered wooden sign that read, "No entry beyond this point." Beyond it, a narrow trail disappeared into the thick woods. "This is it," Josh said, grabbing his gear. "Time to see if these stairs live up to the hype." Dave sighed, slinging his backpack over his shoulder. "Let's hope they're just stairs." As they stepped onto the trail, the forest seemed to swallow them whole. The forest was dense and overgrown, the trail barely visible beneath layers of fallen leaves and gnarled roots. Josh and Dave trudged forward, their boots crunching softly against the uneven ground. The deeper they ventured, the quieter the forest became. Birds stopped chirping, and the wind seemed to hold its breath. "You notice how quiet it is?" Dave asked, glancing around. Josh nodded, gripping his flashlight tighter despite the fading daylight. "Yeah, it's off. Feels like the woods don't want us here." They pressed on, the air growing cooler with each step. After nearly an hour of hiking, Josh stopped abruptly, holding up his hand. "Do you see that?" he whispered, pointing ahead. Through the tangled undergrowth, a shape emerged, rectangular and unnaturally straight against the chaos of the forest. As they drew closer, the object revealed itself. A moss-covered stone staircase, rising out of the ground and disappearing into the air. It was about 20 steps high, weathered and cracked, yet somehow still standing. "There it is," Josh murmured, pulling out his camera. He started filming, his voice steady but tinged with unease. "We've found the stairs. They matched the descriptions, stone, ancient, and leading to nowhere." Dave circled the structure cautiously, his eyes scanning the surrounding area. "It looks wrong," he said, "like it doesn't belong here." Josh moved closer, inspecting the stones. Strange symbols were etched into the sides, barely visible beneath the moss and grime. They were intricate and geometric, patterns that seemed to shift if he stared at them too long. "Look at this," Josh said, pointing to the carvings. "These symbols aren't random. They're deliberate." Dave leaned in, his brow furrowed. "Runes, ritual markings, whatever they are, someone put them here for a reason." The air around the stairs felt heavy, almost electric. Josh reached out to touch the stone, but Dave grabbed his wrist. "Don't," he said sharply. "We don't know what this thing is." Josh hesitated, then lowered his hand. "Fair point." They set up their equipment, placing a camera on a tripod to capture the entire staircase. As Josh adjusted the angle, a faint sound reached their ears. Footsteps, faint and distant, coming from somewhere deeper in the forest. "You hear that?" Dave whispered. Josh froze, his head snapping toward the sound. The footsteps grew louder, steady and deliberate. But there was no visible source. The forest around them remained still, the shadows between the trees growing darker. "Maybe it's a hiker," Josh suggested, though he didn't sound convinced. Dave shook his head. "No one else would come out here." The sound stopped abruptly, leaving an unnatural silence in its wake. Josh and Dave exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence starting to waver. "Let's pack up and come back in the morning," Dave said. Josh hesitated. "No, we stay. Whatever's happening here, it's happening at night." Dave sighed heavily but didn't argue. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the forest plunged into darkness, and the stairs loomed ominously before them. Night descended quickly, wrapping the forest in an oppressive darkness that seemed thicker than it should have been. Josh and Dave huddled near their equipment, their flashlights casting narrow beams of light that barely pushed back against the shadows. "Tell me again why we're staying out here," Dave muttered, fiddling with the settings on a handheld recorder. His voice was strained, his usual bravado clearly eroding. "Because this is when things happen," Josh replied, his camera pointed at the stairs. "We came here to find the truth, and I'm not leaving without something to show for it." Dave opened his mouth to respond, but a sound from deeper in the woods stopped him cold. It was faint at first, a rhythmic murmur that grew steadily louder, chanting. Low and guttural, the voices seemed to vibrate through the air, the words incomprehensible but laden with intent. Josh turned off his flashlight and motioned for Dave to do the same. They crouched behind a cluster of bushes, the darkness enveloping them completely. The chanting grew louder, accompanied by the faint glow of lanterns bobbing through the trees. "Do you see that?" Dave whispered, his voice barely audible. Josh nodded, his heart pounding. A group of figures emerged from the shadows, cloaked in long dark robes. Each carried a lantern that emitted an unnatural, flickering light, casting elongated shadows that danced across the forest floor. There were at least a dozen of them, their faces obscured by deep hoods. The figures formed a circle around the staircase, their chanting growing louder and more fervent. One of them stepped forward, a taller figure with intricate patterns sewn into their robe. This one carried a large clay jar, its surface stained dark with what Josh could only assume was blood. Josh and Dave watched in stunned silence as the figure poured the contents of the jar onto the stairs. The liquid cascaded down the stone steps, pooling at the base. Almost immediately the stairs began to glow faintly, the strange symbols etched into the stone coming to life with an eerie, pulsating light. "What the hell are they doing?" Dave whispered, his voice shaking. "Some kind of ritual," Josh replied, his grip tightening on the camera. He started recording, careful to keep the lens focused on the scene while remaining hidden. The chanting reached a crescendo, and the robed figures dropped to their knees, bowing deeply before the glowing staircase. The tall figure turned toward the forest, their hooded heads scanning the trees. Josh's stomach dropped as the figure raised a hand and pointed directly at them. "It's your turn to climb," the figure said, their voice echoing unnaturally. Before they could react, the cult surged toward them, their lanterns casting grotesque shadows as they closed the distance. Josh and Dave scrambled to their feet, but it was too late. Hands grabbed at their arms, dragging them toward the glowing stairs. "Let us go," Dave shouted, struggling against their captors. The tall figure stepped closer, their face still hidden in shadow. "You were chosen," they said, their voice calm but commanding. "The stairs demand your passage." Josh and Dave exchanged panicked glances as they were forced to the base of the stairs. The glowing light intensified, illuminating the night as the chanting resumed, louder and more fervent than before. Josh's heart pounded as the cult members tightened their grip, dragging him and Dave closer to the glowing stairs. The light pulsed in time with the rhythmic chanting, casting eerie patterns across the forest. The air around them felt alive, crackling with an energy that made Josh's skin crawl. "Let us go," Dave yelled, thrashing against the hands holding him. But the robed figures were unnaturally strong, their grip unyielding. Josh twisted his head, desperately searching for a way out, but the circle of cultists was impenetrable. The tall figure in the intricately patterned robe stepped forward, their face hidden deep within the hood. They raised a hand, and the chanting abruptly ceased. "The stairs have chosen," the figure said, their voice low and resonant. It seemed to echo unnaturally as though coming from all directions at once. "You will ascend as it has been foretold." Josh tried to speak, to reason with them, but his words came out in a panicked jumble. We're not part of this, we just..." The tall figure tilted their head as if studying him. "The stairs care not for your intentions. They demand passage." Dave turned to Josh, his eyes wide with terror. "Josh, what do we do?" Josh didn't have an answer. His mind raced, but no plan presented itself. The cult members forced them forward, their boots scraping against the moss-covered ground. As they reached the base of the stairs, the symbols etched into the stone flared brighter, bathing the forest in an otherworldly glow. The tall figure raised their arms, addressing the group. "Blood has been spilled. The way is open. Let them ascend." The cult members released their grip, but the message was clear. There was no escape. The circle of robed figures closed around the staircase, their hoods turning toward Josh and Dave in unison. "We have to do it," Josh whispered, his voice trembling. "If we don't, they'll kill us," Dave finished, his face pale. With no other choice, Josh placed a hesitant foot on the first step. The stone was warm beneath his boot, almost pulsing as if alive. Dave followed, his movements stiff with fear. As they climbed, the air grew thicker, pressing down on them like an invisible weight. The chanting resumed, louder now, filling the forest with an unsettling harmony. Each step they took made the light intensify, and the energy around them seemed to hum with anticipation. By the time they reached the top, the glow was blinding. Josh shielded his eyes, but the light seemed to seep through his eyelids, burning into his vision. The air vibrated violently, and a deafening roar filled his ears. Then everything went black. When Josh opened his eyes, he wasn't in the forest anymore. The ground beneath him was smooth and cold, and the air smelled of something metallic and unfamiliar. He turned his head slowly, his heart sinking as he took in the surreal landscape before him. "Dave," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Where are we?" Dave sat up beside him, his face etched with fear. "I don't know, but I think we're not on Earth anymore." They both turned toward the staircase they'd climbed, but it wasn't the same. The steps now led up to an enormous, shimmering barrier that pulsed with light. Beyond it, shadowy shapes moved, their forms tall and impossibly thin. And they were watching. The air was thick and suffocating, each breath tasting of metal and ozone. Josh staggered to his feet, the alien ground beneath him shifting subtly as though alive. It was smooth and black, shimmering faintly like glass but unnervingly pliable underfoot. The sky above swirled with dark hues, violet, crimson, and gray, twisting like a storm that would never break. "What is this place?" Dave asked, his voice barely above a whisper. He stood rigid, his eyes locked on the figures moving beyond the shimmering barrier at the top of the stairs. Josh didn't answer. He couldn't. His mind was struggling to process the impossibility of the scene before him. The tall, inhuman shapes loomed in the distance, their forms vaguely humanoid but unnervingly wrong. Their limbs were elongated, bending at unnatural angles as they moved with a fluid, almost predatory grace. Then there was the sound, low and guttural, like a deep hum that vibrated through the air and into their bones. It wasn't just noise. It felt purposeful, like the beings were communicating in a way humans couldn't fully comprehend. "We need to get out of here," Dave said, his voice trembling. "Josh, the stairs. Where are the stairs?" Josh turned toward where they'd come from, his stomach sinking. The staircase was there, but it had changed. The steps now led up to the barrier, and the symbols on the stone pulsed with a faint, sickly green light. The air around it shimmered, like heat waves rising from asphalt. Josh reached out instinctively, but as his hand neared the barrier, a sharp jolt of energy shot through him, sending him stumbling backward. "We can't go back," he said, panic creeping into his voice. "It won't let us through." Dave's breathing quickened. "What do you mean it won't let us through? This is how we got here." Josh shook his head, his mind racing. "The barrier. It's blocking us. There's got to be another way." A loud echoing crack split the air, freezing them both in place. One of the shadowy shapes turned, its hollow face, or what passed for a face, fixed on them. It began to move, gliding toward them with a deliberate slowness that was somehow more terrifying than if it had charged. "Run," Josh said, grabbing Dave's arm. They sprinted across the alien terrain, the ground shifting beneath their feet as if trying to slow them down. Behind them, the shape picked up speed, its long limbs moving in jerky, unnatural motions. The guttural hum intensified, vibrating through the air and filling their heads with a nauseating pressure. They dove behind a jagged, rock-like structure that jutted out of the ground. Josh peeked around the edge, his heart hammering. The shadowy figure had stopped, its head tilted as if listening. It moved slowly, scanning the area with a predatory precision. "What do we do?" Dave whispered, clutching at his knees as he tried to catch his breath. Josh's mind raced, his instincts screaming at him to stay quiet. "We hide," he said finally, "and we figure out how to get through that barrier." Dave looked at him, his eyes filled with desperation. "What if we can't?" Josh didn't answer. He didn't want to think about that. From their hiding spot, they watched as more of the shadowy shapes began to gather in the distance, and beyond them, towering over everything, was something far larger. Its silhouette was monstrous, barely distinguishable in the swirling sky, but its presence was palpable, a weight pressing down on them from miles away. Josh clenched his fists. "We'll find a way," he said, more to himself than to Dave. "We have to." Josh and Dave crouched low behind the jagged rock formation, their breaths shallow as they watched the shadowy figure scan the landscape. Its movements were unnervingly deliberate, its elongated limbs twitching slightly as it glided forward. The guttural hum that accompanied it grew louder, reverberating through the air like a pulse. "Don't move," Josh whispered, barely audible. He pressed his back against the rock, gripping Dave's arm tightly. "It's looking for us." Dave nodded, his eyes wide and his face pale. He clutched at his camera like a lifeline, though its blinking light was now a liability. He quickly turned it off, plunging them further into the oppressive darkness of the alien landscape. The figure paused, its head, or what passed for one, tilting toward their hiding spot. Josh held his breath, his entire body tense. The creature emitted a low, rumbling sound, and for a terrifying moment it began to move closer. Josh's mind raced. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew it would be pointless. The thing was faster, and this wasn't Earth. He didn't understand the rules here, only that the creatures played by them. The shadowy figure suddenly stopped, turning its attention to a distant point. Josh risked a glance and saw another shape, smaller, gliding toward the shimmering barrier surrounding the staircase. The figure held a small, glowing metallic orb in its spindly hands. "Do you see that?" Josh whispered, nudging Dave. Dave peeked over the rock, his brow furrowing. "What's it doing?" The smaller figure approached the barrier, holding the orb high. As it stepped forward, the shimmering wall parted like water, allowing the figure to pass through. The orb's glow intensified as the barrier sealed itself behind the creature. Josh's breath caught. "That's it," he said, his voice trembling with equal parts fear and hope. "The orb, it's how they're getting through." Dave stared at him, his expression a mix of disbelief and dread. "You're saying we need to steal one of those things?" Josh nodded, his eyes fixed on the orbs. "If we don't, we're stuck here. That's the key." Another shadowy shape moved in the distance, this one holding an orb as well. The two creatures passed by each other, seemingly unaware of Josh and Dave's presence. Josh's stomach twisted as he realized how close they were to the beings, yet they hadn't been detected. Yet. "We need a plan," Dave said, his voice low but urgent. "We can't just grab one and hope for the best." Josh nodded, his mind working furiously. "They're not omniscient," he said, watching the creatures carefully. "They rely on movement and sound. If we're fast and quiet, we might have a chance." Dave swallowed hard. "And if we don't?" Josh's face was grim. "Then we die here." The shadowy figure closest to them began moving again, its orb faintly illuminating the ground as it glided away from the barrier. Josh felt his pulse quicken. This was their chance. "Stay low," Josh whispered, "and stay quiet." The two of them began creeping along the alien terrain, their eyes locked on the glowing orb. Every step felt agonizingly slow, the ground shifting beneath their feet as if resisting their movements. The hum in the air grew louder, almost as if the creatures could sense their intent. As they closed the distance, the shadowy figure stopped abruptly, its head tilting as if listening. Josh froze, his heart hammering in his chest. The figure emitted another low rumble, then began to move again, its attention elsewhere. Josh glanced at Dave and mouthed, "Almost there." They were close now, close enough to see the faint patterns etched into the orb's surface. But with every inch they gained, the sense of danger grew, the towering presence in the distance seeming to loom closer. Josh clenched his fists. They had one shot at this, and if they failed, there would be no escape. Josh's palms were slick with sweat as he crouched lower, his eyes fixed on the faint glow of the metallic orb. It was cradled in the elongated fingers of the shadowy figure, casting a soft, eerie light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the hum that filled the air. The creature moved slowly, its motions almost mechanical as it glided across the alien terrain. Josh could feel the vibrations of its movements through the ground, each step resonating in his chest. "Do you see the markings on it?" Dave whispered, barely audible. Josh nodded, his gaze locked on the orb. The faint patterns etched into its surface were similar to the symbols they had seen on the staircase back in the forest. The thought made his stomach churn. These things weren't just alien. They were deeply connected to the horrors they had already encountered. The shadowy figure paused again, tilting its head toward the barrier. Josh froze, holding his breath. The hum in the air grew louder, and for a moment it felt like the creature was aware of them. But then it continued moving, its attention seemingly elsewhere. Josh peered around the edge, his eyes narrowing as he studied the creature. The orb rested lightly in its hands, and its glow seemed to pulse more intensely whenever the creature neared the barrier. "We wait for the right moment. When it's distracted, we grab it and run." "Run where?" Dave asked, his voice tinged with panic. "There's nowhere to hide in this place. Those things—" "We don't have a choice," Josh cut him off, his tone firm. "If we don't get that orb, we're stuck here. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Dave shook his head, but he didn't argue further. He clutched his camera tightly as though it might provide some kind of protection. The shadowy figure began moving again, this time turning its back to them. Josh's heart leapt. This was the chance they needed. "Now," Josh whispered, motioning for Dave to follow. They moved quickly, their footsteps as silent as they could manage on the shifting terrain. The glow of the orb grew brighter as they closed the distance, its strange, rhythmic pulsing almost hypnotic. Josh reached out, his hand trembling as he prepared to snatch the orb. He could feel the heat radiating from it, a strange warmth that seemed to seep into his skin. The shadowy figure paused again, its head tilting slightly. "Do it!" Dave hissed, his voice tight with urgency. With a burst of adrenaline, Josh lunged forward and grabbed the orb from the creature's grasp. The moment his fingers closed around it, the hum in the air turned into a deafening roar. The figure whirled around, its hollow face locking onto Josh. The glow of the orb flared, illuminating the creature's grotesque, shifting form. "Run!" Josh shouted, clutching the orb tightly as he and Dave bolted. Behind them, the roar intensified, and the ground seemed to quake beneath their feet. The shadowy figure gave chase, its elongated limbs moving with an unnatural speed. Josh didn't dare look back. All that mattered now was getting to the barrier and escaping before it was too late. Josh and Dave sprinted across the alien terrain, the orb clutched tightly in Josh's hands. The ground beneath them seemed to ripple, pulling at their feet as if trying to trap them. Behind them, the shadowy figure gave chase, its movements unnaturally fast and fluid, limbs stretching and twisting as it closed the distance. "Faster!" Dave shouted, his voice barely audible over the deafening hum that now filled the air. It wasn't just sound, it was pressure, a crushing force that seemed to weigh them down with every step. Josh's lungs burned as he pushed himself harder, his grip tightening on the orb. Its surface was warm and vibrating faintly, the etched symbols glowing brighter with each passing second. Ahead, the shimmering barrier surrounding the staircase came into view, a beacon of hope in the oppressive alien landscape. "There," Josh yelled, pointing toward the barrier. "We just have to get through." As they neared the barrier, more shadowy figures began to emerge from the distance, their hollow faces turned toward the commotion. The hum grew louder, a symphony of alien sounds that rattled in Josh's skull. The towering, monstrous silhouette far off in the distance seemed to shift, its massive form inching closer, casting an ominous shadow across the landscape. Josh glanced back and saw the figure chasing them reach out with one of its elongated arms, claw-like fingers stretching impossibly far. "Move!" he screamed, shoving Dave ahead. They reached the barrier, its shimmering surface radiating heat and light. Josh hesitated for only a split second before thrusting the orb forward. The moment it touched the barrier, the glowing field parted, creating a narrow opening just large enough for them to squeeze through. "Go!" Josh shouted, shoving Dave through first. The shadowy figure was almost upon them, its distorted limbs clawing at the ground as it lunged forward. Without looking back, Josh dove through the barrier, clutching the orb as tightly as he could. The barrier sealed behind them with a blinding flash, cutting off the shadowy figure mid-lunge. Its hand struck the barrier and disintegrated, the creature recoiling with an inhuman wail. Josh and Dave tumbled onto the steps of the staircase, gasping for air as the alien landscape blurred and shifted around them. The staircase pulsed with light, and the symbols on the stones began to glow. The familiar forest began to take shape around them, the oppressive air of the alien world giving way to the cold night breeze. "We did it," Dave gasped, collapsing onto the ground. "We're back." Josh looked down at the orb in his hands, its glow fading slowly. But before he could feel any relief, a sound behind them made his blood run cold, a guttural roar, low and menacing. He turned to see the shimmering barrier at the top of the stairs ripple violently. The shadowy shapes were still coming. Josh scrambled to his feet, his heart pounding as the shimmering barrier at the top of the stairs trembled violently. The roar that followed was deep and resonant, vibrating through the air and into his chest. It was a sound of anger, of something vast and ancient straining against the confines of the barrier. Dave staggered upright, clutching his camera like a lifeline. "They're coming through," he said, his voice trembling. "What do we do now?" Josh turned toward the forest. The cult members had emerged from the shadows, their dark robes swirling as they approached the staircase. Their faces, hidden beneath deep hoods, were turned toward Josh and Dave in unison. "You fools," the tall figure hissed, stepping forward. The intricate patterns on their robes seemed to shimmer in the faint light. "You've broken the covenant." "What covenant?" Josh snapped, holding the orb tightly in his hands. "What are you talking about?" The figure gestured toward the glowing staircase, their voice dripping with disdain. "The covenant that keeps them at bay. The stairs are a bridge, a doorway to the other side. We appease them with sacrifices, ensuring their hunger is satisfied. And now, you've ruined everything." Josh's stomach sank as the pieces fell into place. The cult hadn't been worshipping the beings, they had been keeping them contained. The blood they had poured on the stairs was more than ritual. It was a payment. Before Josh could respond, the barrier at the top of the stairs burst open with a blinding flash of light. The shadowy shapes spilled through, their elongated limbs writhing unnaturally as they descended the steps. Their hollow faces turned toward the cult, and a guttural hum filled the air, heavy with malice. The cult members froze, their earlier confidence crumbling into panic. "No," the tall figure whispered, their voice trembling. "No, this cannot be." One of the shadowy figures lunged, its spindly arms stretching impossibly far. It grabbed a cult member and dragged them screaming into the mass of darkness. The other figures followed, their movements fast and deliberate as they tore through the group. Josh and Dave stood paralyzed, watching the carnage unfold. The cult's rhythmic chanting was replaced by cries of terror as the beings tore them apart with merciless precision. "We need to go," Josh said, grabbing Dave's arm. "Now!" They turned and bolted, the sounds of slaughter fading as they ran deeper into the forest. The glowing orb in Josh's hand pulsed faintly, as though reacting to the chaos behind them. As they reached the tree line, Josh risked a glance back. The shadowy shapes had decimated the cult, their forms swarming over the bodies like a dark tide, and behind them, rising above the staircase, was something far worse. The towering entity they had seen in the alien world was forcing its way through the portal, its massive form barely contained by the shimmering light. Its grotesque limbs stretched across the staircase, and its roar echoed through the night like thunder. Josh turned away, his chest heaving. "We have to get to the van," he said. "We can't stay here." Dave nodded, his face pale. "What if it follows us?" Josh didn't answer. He didn't want to think about that. The forest seemed to blur around them as they ran, the night filled with unnatural sounds. The orb grew colder in Josh's hands, its glow fading completely as they finally reached the van. They threw open the doors and scrambled inside, slamming them shut behind them. Josh fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he started the engine. The van roared to life, and they sped down the dirt road, leaving the cursed staircase and the horrors it had unleashed behind. The van hurtled down the dirt road, its tires kicking up loose gravel as Josh gripped the wheel with white-knuckled hands. The forest around them seemed alive with movement, shadows flickering at the edges of their headlights, branches bending unnaturally as if bowing to an unseen force. Dave sat in the passenger seat, his chest heaving as he clutched the camera tightly to his chest. "Do you hear it?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the roar of the engine. Josh didn't respond. He didn't need to. The guttural hum they had first heard in the alien world was now filling the air, louder and more oppressive with every passing second. It was no longer just sound. It was a force, pressing down on them like an immense weight. As they rounded a bend, Josh stole a glance in the rearview mirror. His breath caught. The towering entity had broken through the portal, its grotesque form stretching impossibly high into the night sky. Its limbs were massive and jagged, each movement rippling with a fluid, otherworldly grace. Eyes, too many to count, opened along its body, glowing faintly as they scanned the forest below. "It's coming," Dave muttered, his voice trembling. "Josh, it's coming." The entity let out a roar that shook the earth, a sound so deep and resonant that it felt like it could split the world in two. Behind it, the shadowy figures swarmed, flowing out of the portal and spreading through the forest like an invading army. The cult was gone. Nothing more than broken bodies and torn robes scattered around the stairs. Josh floored the accelerator, the van shuddering as it barreled down the uneven road. "We're almost there," he said, his voice tight with panic. "Just hold on." The lights of the main road appeared ahead, a beacon of hope in the endless darkness. But as they reached the edge of the forest, the hum intensified, and the van's engine sputtered violently. "No, no, no," Josh shouted, slamming his fist against the dashboard. The van jerked forward, its headlights flickering as the entity's roar echoed once more. Suddenly, the orb in Josh's lap flared with light, its symbols glowing brighter than ever before. The oppressive hum ceased for a brief moment, and the van's engine roared back to life. The two men exchanged a glance, their terror momentarily replaced by confusion. "Just drive," Dave yelled. Josh didn't hesitate. He pushed the accelerator to the floor, the van lurching forward as they finally broke free of the forest's suffocating grip. The hum faded into the distance, and the oppressive energy that had surrounded them began to dissipate. As they reached the highway, the silence inside the van was deafening. Josh's hands shook on the wheel, his knuckles white. Dave slumped in his seat, staring out the window with hollow eyes. "We made it," Josh whispered, though the words felt hollow. Dave turned to him, his face pale. "For now." They drove for miles in silence before finally pulling over at a deserted rest stop. Josh turned off the engine and they sat in the darkness, the weight of what they had witnessed pressing down on them. Josh finally broke the silence. "The cult, the staircase. It's not just a legend, it's real." Dave nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the orb in Josh's lap. "And now it's loose. Whatever that thing is, it's not going back." Josh exhaled shakily, his mind racing. "We have to warn people, tell them what we saw." Dave hesitated. "Do you think anyone will believe us?" Josh stared out into the night, his jaw tightening. "They don't have to believe us, we just have to tell the truth." The two men sat in the van, the orb between them, as the weight of their ordeal settled over them. Beyond the Veil, investigations had started as a passion project, a quest to uncover the unknown. But now they had seen too much, faced something far beyond their comprehension. The world might never believe them, but Josh and Dave knew one thing for certain. The veil between worlds was thinner than anyone realized, and something had slipped through. Hey everyone, so something really weird happened to me recently, and I've been dying to share it with someone. I'm not usually one to post on Reddit, but I feel like I need to get this off my chest. And honestly, I'm curious to see if anyone else has experienced something similar. It all started a few weeks ago. I'm a night owl, always have been. My job doesn't require me to wake up early, so I often stay up late, watching TV, playing video games, or just browsing the internet. One night I stumbled across a thread on the dark web. Now before you judge me, I'm not into anything illegal or shady. I'm just curious by nature and sometimes like to see the weird corners of the internet. Anyway, this thread caught my eye because it was about UFO sightings. The title was something like, "Weird Lights in the Sky, Anyone Else Seen This?" It had a bunch of replies, and I was intrigued. I've always been fascinated by the idea of extraterrestrial life, so I clicked on it and started reading. The original poster described how they had seen a strange light in the sky late at night. At first, it was just a single dot, hovering there like a distant star, but then it split into two, then four, forming a perfect square in the sky. They said it was eerily silent and seemed to glow with an otherworldly light, not like anything they'd ever seen before. They were convinced it was a UFO, and honestly, so was I by the time I finished reading their account. As I scrolled through the comments, I realized that a lot of people had seen similar things. Some described lights that moved in impossible ways, making sharp turns or accelerating to incredible speeds before vanishing. Others talked about seeing these lights in remote areas, far from any city or town. There were even a few posts from people who claimed to have seen them up close, describing strange metallic objects hovering silently in the night sky. I felt a chill run down my spine. You see, I had seen something like this before. It was years ago when I was just a kid. I was camping with my family in a national park. One night I woke up and decided to step outside our tent to get some fresh air. As I looked up at the sky, I saw them, 4 lights forming a square, moving in unison across the sky. They didn't make a sound. I remember feeling a mix of awe and fear, like I was witnessing something I wasn't supposed to see. I never told anyone about it, not even my parents. I just convinced myself it was a dream or a trick of the light. But now, reading all these similar stories, I knew it wasn't a dream. It was real, and other people had seen it too. I spent hours that night reading through every post, every comment. Some people had theories about what the lights could be: government experiments, advanced drones, or even secret military aircraft. But the majority, like me, believed they were something extraterrestrial, aliens. The thought both terrified and excited me. I decided to share my own experience. I wrote a long post detailing what I had seen as a kid and how I had stumbled across the thread that night. I described the lights, how they moved, and how they had vanished into the night sky. I asked if anyone else had seen them recently and what they thought they could be. As soon as I hit post, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and relief. It was out there now, my story. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Little did I know, that was just the beginning. What happened next would change everything I thought I knew about those lights and about the world we live in. This is just the beginning, folks. I'll share more soon. In the meantime, I'd love to hear if any of you have had similar experiences. Have you seen strange lights in the sky? What do you think they are? Aliens? Something else? Let me know in the comments. Hey again. Thanks for all the responses to my first post. Reading through your comments made me realize just how many people have had similar experiences. Some of your stories are downright chilling. But let me continue where I left off. The night after I shared my story, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd opened a door I wasn't supposed to. My mind was racing with thoughts of those lights, the stories I'd read, and the possibility that we might not be alone. That night, I decided to step outside and see if I could spot anything unusual. It was a clear night, the sky dotted with stars. I live in a fairly rural area, so light pollution isn't much of an issue. As I stood in my backyard, staring up at the sky, I felt a sense of anticipation, like something was about to happen. I must have stood there for at least an hour, scanning the heavens, but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Disappointed, I went back inside and tried to put it out of my mind. Over the next few days, I kept returning to that dark web thread, reading and rereading the posts. It became an obsession. I started noticing patterns, certain locations where the lights were frequently seen, specific times of night when they appeared. I even found a few posts from people who claimed they'd been visited by men in black after sharing their stories. I wasn't sure if I believed that part, but it definitely added to the mystery. Then, about a week after my initial post, something strange happened. I received a private message from an anonymous user. They didn't have a username, just a series of random letters and numbers. The message was brief, but it sent chills down my spine. It said, "I've seen the lights too. Meet me at the old barn on Maple Road at midnight if you want answers." I was hesitant. Meeting a stranger at midnight in an isolated location sounded like the beginning of a bad horror movie. But my curiosity got the better of me. I had to know more. I decided to go, but I took precautions. I told a friend where I was going and made sure my phone was fully charged. When I arrived at the old barn, it was exactly as eerie as I'd imagined. The structure was dilapidated, with broken windows and peeling paint. The moon cast long shadows across the field, and the only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of an owl. I parked my car a little way down the road and approached the barn on foot. Inside, it was dark and musty. I used the flashlight on my phone to navigate. Just as I was about to give up and leave, I heard a voice behind me. "You came." I spun around, my heart pounding. There, standing in the shadows, was a man. He looked to be in his 40s, with unkempt hair and a haunted expression. He stepped into the light, and I could see he was holding something, a file folder. "I'm glad you decided to meet," he said. "I've been trying to find others who've seen the lights." He introduced himself as Jack, and we sat down on an old wooden crate. Jack told me he'd been researching these lights for years. He had a collection of photos, newspaper clippings, and personal accounts from people all over the country. He believed the lights were part of a larger phenomenon, something the government was aware of but keeping secret. Jack showed me photos he'd taken, blurry but unmistakable images of the lights forming those same patterns in the sky. He explained that he'd seen them multiple times, always in remote areas, always late at night. He believed they were not just random occurrences, but part of some kind of surveillance or experiment. We talked for hours, sharing our experiences and theories. Jack was convinced that the lights were extraterrestrial, but he also entertained the possibility that they could be advanced human technology. Either way, he was determined to find out the truth. As the night wore on, Jack gave me the file folder. It was filled with documents and photos, a treasure trove of information about the lights. He urged me to keep digging, to share what I found, and to be careful. "There are people who don't want this information to get out," he warned. I left the barn that night feeling a mix of fear and exhilaration. I had more questions than answers, but I was more determined than ever to uncover the truth. Little did I know my investigation was about to take a dark and unexpected turn. Thanks for reading or listening, everyone. If any of you have seen these lights or have information to share, please comment. We need to piece this puzzle together. Hey everyone, I'm back with the next part of my story. I appreciate all the feedback and theories from the last post. Your insights have been really helpful. So, here's what happened next. After my meeting with Jack, I spent hours poring over the file he gave me. It was filled with detailed accounts of sightings, hand-drawn maps, and photographs of the lights. One thing that stood out was a recurring location, an abandoned airfield about 30 miles from my town. Multiple reports mentioned seeing the lights hovering over this place before disappearing. I decided to visit the airfield. It was a Saturday, so I had the whole day to investigate. I packed some snacks, a flashlight, and my camera, and set off in the early afternoon. The drive was uneventful, but as I approached the airfield, I felt a strange sense of foreboding. The airfield was a relic from World War II, long abandoned and overgrown with weeds. The main building was crumbling, and the runways were cracked and faded. It looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. I parked my car at the edge of the property and began to explore on foot. As I wandered through the old buildings, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. I took several photos of the area, hoping to capture something unusual. After a couple of hours, I decided to check out the main hangar. The massive doors were ajar, creaking ominously as I pushed them open. Inside, the air was cool and musty. Sunlight streamed through broken windows, casting eerie shadows on the floor. I cautiously walked deeper into the hangar, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. In the far corner, I noticed something odd, a pile of old rusted equipment. As I got closer, I realized it wasn't just junk. There were strange devices and instruments that looked like they belonged in a science lab, not an airfield. Among the clutter, I found a metal box with a padlock. I managed to break it open using a piece of rebar I found nearby. Inside the box were more documents, similar to the ones Jack had given me, but these were different. They were official-looking, with government seals and classified stamps. My heart raced as I flipped through them. There were reports detailing sightings of the lights, but these were written by military personnel. There were also diagrams of the lights' formations and notes on their movements. One document stood out. It was a letter dated a few months ago from someone named Dr. Elizabeth Warren. She was a scientist working on a top-secret project called Project Watcher. According to the letter, the lights were not extraterrestrial but man-made. They were part of an advanced surveillance system designed to monitor atmospheric conditions and potentially hostile activity. Dr. Warren mentioned that the lights had been tested in several remote locations, including the airfield I was standing in. She expressed concerns about the project's secrecy and the ethical implications of using such technology without public knowledge. My mind was reeling. If this was true, then the lights weren't aliens but part of some secret government project. It was a relief in some ways, but also deeply unsettling. What else were they hiding from us? I carefully packed the documents back into the box and took it with me. As I left the hangar, the sun was beginning to set. I had a feeling that things were going to get a lot more complicated from here on out. That night, I returned home and started scanning the documents. I wanted to share them with you all, but I was also worried about the potential consequences. What if the government was monitoring these forums? What if they came after me like those stories of the men in black? As I sat in my room surrounded by the evidence, my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. Be careful. They know you have the documents. My heart skipped a beat. How did they know? Who were they? I quickly typed back, "Who is this?" but got no response. That's where I am right now, guys. I'm sitting here, trying to make sense of everything, and wondering what my next move should be. I'm determined to get to the bottom of this, but I'm also scared. If you have any advice or know anything about Project Watcher, please let me know. Thanks for sticking with me, everyone. If any of you have encountered similar situations or know more about this project, please share. We need to uncover the truth together. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and advice. Your insights have been invaluable. So here's what happened next. After receiving that cryptic message, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I double-checked the locks on my doors and windows and even set up a few makeshift security measures around my house. Paranoia was creeping in, but I knew I had to stay focused. I spent the next few days analyzing the documents I found at the airfield, trying to piece together the puzzle. One document in particular stood out. It was a report detailing an incident where the lights had malfunctioned and descended to ground level. The report mentioned a remote area about 50 miles from my town, where local authorities had responded to strange activity. The details were vague, but it seemed like a good lead. I decided to investigate the area mentioned in the report. This time I took my friend Mike with me. He's always been a skeptic when it comes to UFOs and government conspiracies, but he agreed to come along for the ride. We set off early in the morning, equipped with cameras, flashlights, and some basic camping gear in case we needed to stay overnight. The location was deep in the woods, far from any main roads. As we trekked through the dense forest, we noticed how eerily quiet it was. No birds, no rustling leaves, just silence. After about an hour of hiking, we reached a clearing. In the center, there was a charred patch of ground, as if something had landed or crashed there. The air smelled faintly of burnt metal. We began searching the area, looking for any clues. Mike, still skeptical, joked about finding alien footprints, but his laughter quickly died down when we discovered something unusual. Half buried in the dirt was a small metallic object. It was shaped like a disc, about the size of a dinner plate, with strange symbols etched into its surface. It looked like nothing I had ever seen before. We carefully dug it out and examined it. The symbols glowed faintly, pulsing with a soft blue light. Mike's skepticism turned to curiosity as we tried to figure out what it could be. I took several photos and decided to take it back with us for further analysis. As we were packing up to leave, we heard a low humming sound. It started faint but quickly grew louder. We looked up and saw them. The lights. They were back, hovering just above the treetops, forming that same eerie square pattern. This time they seemed closer, more deliberate in their movements. We stood there, frozen in awe and fear, as the lights moved silently across the sky. They hovered for a few moments, then shot off in different directions at incredible speeds. The whole encounter lasted less than a minute, but it felt like an eternity. We hurried back to the car, adrenaline pumping. Mike, who had always been a skeptic, was now a believer. "What the hell was that?" he kept repeating. I had no answers, just more questions. Back at my place, we examined the metallic object more closely. It seemed to be some sort of advanced technology, but we had no idea what its purpose was. We decided to keep it hidden and not tell anyone else about it, at least for now. That night, as I was lying in bed, my phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. "You're getting too close. Stop now or face the consequences." I felt a chill run down my spine. They were watching us, and they knew about the object. I didn't know who they were, but it was clear they were serious about keeping this a secret. I spent the next few days laying low, avoiding any unnecessary risks. I debated whether to continue my investigation or heed the warning. But curiosity and the need for answers won out. I knew I had to keep going, but I needed to be more cautious. That's where things stand now. I'm on the verge of a breakthrough, but I'm also in more danger than ever. If anyone has any advice or has experienced similar warnings, please share. I could use all the help I can get. Thanks for following along, everyone. If you have any insights or know someone who might be able to help, please reach out. We need to uncover the truth behind these lights and the mysterious object. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking with me through this wild journey. Here's the final part of my story. After receiving that last warning message, I knew I had to be extremely careful. The mysterious object Mike and I found in the woods was still hidden in my house, and I was determined to find out more about it. I spent hours online, scouring forums and reaching out to anyone who might have information. One user, who went by the name Watcher42, seemed particularly knowledgeable and offered to help. We arranged to meet at a local diner, a public place where I felt safe. When I arrived, I immediately recognized Watcher42 from his description, a middle-aged man with a gray beard and glasses. He was sitting in a corner booth looking around nervously. I introduced myself and we got straight to the point. I showed him photos of the object and recounted our encounter with the lights. His eyes widened as he examined the images. "This is big," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've heard rumors about these objects. They're part of a covert project, something the government has been hiding for years. They call it Project Guardian. The lights you saw are drones, advanced surveillance devices, but this," he pointed to the object in the photo, "this is a control module. It's what they use to direct the drones." My heart raced. A control module? If what he was saying was true, we had stumbled upon something incredibly significant. "Why would they go to such lengths to keep this secret?" I asked. "Because the technology isn't just for surveillance," Watcher 42 replied. "It's capable of far more, including things that could revolutionize energy production, communications, even space travel. But in the wrong hands, it could also be weaponized. That's why they're so desperate to keep it under wraps." As we talked, I noticed a black SUV parked outside the diner. 2 men in dark suits were sitting inside, watching us. I pointed them out to Watcher 42, who paled visibly. "We need to leave, now," he said. We quickly paid the bill and exited through the back door. We split up, agreeing to meet at a safe location later. I made my way home, taking a circuitous route to ensure I wasn't being followed. Once I was sure I was alone, I called Mike and told him everything. We decided to go public with what we'd found. The risk of keeping this secret was too great, and people needed to know the truth. We spent the next few days compiling all the evidence we had: photos, documents, and our personal accounts. We wrote a detailed report and uploaded it to multiple platforms, ensuring it couldn't be easily taken down. The response was overwhelming. Within hours, our story went viral. People from all over the world began sharing their own encounters and experiences. The media picked up the story, and it quickly became a sensation. Experts weighed in, debating the authenticity of the evidence and the implications of Project Guardian. Of course, there was backlash. Government officials denied any knowledge of the project, and skeptics tried to discredit us. But the sheer volume of testimonies and evidence was too much to ignore. Investigations were launched, and soon, more whistleblowers came forward, revealing even more about the secretive project. A few days later, I received another message from the unknown number. "You've made a powerful enemy. Be careful." I knew this wasn't over, but at least the truth was out there. Mike and I continued to receive messages from people who had seen the lights or found similar objects. We formed a network of like-minded individuals, dedicated to uncovering and sharing the truth. It felt good to know we weren't alone in this. As for the control module, we handed it over to a group of independent scientists who promised to study it and share their findings with the world. It was a small victory, but a significant one. This journey has been terrifying and exhilarating, but it's far from over. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know one thing: the truth is out there, and it's up to us to find it. Thanks for following along, everyone. Stay vigilant, stay curious, and keep questioning. We need to uncover the truth together. And that's the end of my story for now. If you have any experiences or information to share, please do. We're all in this together, and every piece of the puzzle helps. I've always been a skeptic, someone who dismissed conspiracy theories as nothing more than the ramblings of the paranoid. But what I encountered on the dark web changed my perspective forever. I still can't believe I'm sharing this, but it's something that needs to be told. This is my story, and though it sounds like pure fiction, I assure you it's disturbingly real. It all started one sleepless night when I was browsing the more obscure corners of the internet. Bored and curious, I found myself on a forum dedicated to conspiracy theories. Most of the posts were your typical nonsense about government cover-ups and secret societies. But one thread caught my eye. Proof of advanced extraterrestrial technology leaked from research facility. The The post was from an anonymous user who claimed to be a former scientist at a top-secret research facility. According to him, they had been studying technology from a crashed UFO. Normally, I would have dismissed it outright, but the details were strangely compelling. He talked about how the technology defied our laws of physics and time, and how they had discovered ways to bend space and time. He mentioned something about time travel and teleportation, concepts that seemed straight out of a science fiction movie. Intrigued, I sent the user a private message asking for more information. To my surprise, he responded almost immediately. He claimed that the UFO had been found in a remote part of the world and that the government had kept it a secret for decades. The technology inside was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Devices that could manipulate time and space, allowing for instantaneous travel across vast distances, and even through time. At first I thought he was pulling my leg, but the more we talked, the more convinced I became. He sent me schematics, technical documents, and even some blurry photos of the supposed UFO and its inner workings. The photos showed a sleek metallic craft with an otherworldly design. The documents, filled with complex equations and diagrams, were beyond my comprehension, but they looked legitimate enough. One night, after weeks of communication, he asked if I wanted to see a demonstration. It sounded too good to be true, but my curiosity got the better of me. He told me to meet him at a specified location, a secluded area outside of town, late at night. Against my better judgment, I agreed. As I drove to the location, a sense of unease washed over me. What if this was a trap? What if he was some kind of lunatic? But the need to know the truth kept me going. When I arrived, I saw a single figure standing in the darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of a laptop screen. He introduced himself simply as Dr. X, refusing to give his real name. He seemed jittery, constantly glancing over his shoulder as if he were being watched. He told me he didn't have much time and quickly pulled out a small device from his bag. It looked like a futuristic remote control, with a series of glowing buttons and a small screen. "This," he said, holding it up, "is a temporal displacement device. It allows you to bend time and space. I've only managed to get it to work for short distances and brief moments, but it's enough to prove it's real." He pressed a button, and the air around us seemed to ripple. For a moment, everything felt distorted, like we were underwater. Then, just as suddenly, it stopped. Dr. X looked at me, a wild gleam in his eyes. "Look at your watch," he said. I glanced down and felt a chill run down my spine. My watch had stopped for exactly 30 seconds, even though I knew I had been conscious the entire time. Dr. X explained that we had just experienced a minor temporal shift, a brief leap forward in time. My mind raced with possibilities. If this technology was real, it could change everything we knew about the universe. But before I could ask more questions, Dr. X abruptly packed up his equipment. He handed me a flash drive, urging me to keep it safe. "This has everything you need to understand what's happening," he said. "I can't stay here any longer. They're after me. You have to expose the truth." With that, he disappeared into the night, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the tiny device that had just defied the laws of physics. I drove home in a daze, my mind struggling to process everything I had seen and heard. Over the next few days, I delved into the contents of the flash drive. It was filled with technical data, research notes, and more photos of the UFO and its technology. The more I read, the more convinced I became that Dr. X was telling the truth. This was real. This was happening. But as I dug deeper, I began to notice strange things. My internet connection would drop unexpectedly, and my phone would make odd noises. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. One night I came home to find my apartment ransacked, my computer destroyed, and the flash drive missing. Whoever was behind this, they were serious about keeping their secrets hidden. I realized that by getting involved, I had put myself in grave danger. But it was too late to turn back now. I had to know the truth, and I had to share it with the world. So here I am, posting this on Reddit, hoping someone out there will believe me and help expose the truth. The technology I saw defies everything we know about the universe. It's real and it's out there. And if it falls into the wrong hands, it could change everything. This is just the beginning of my story. There's so much more to tell, but I need to be careful. I'll post more updates as I uncover more information. For now, stay safe, and remember, the truth is out there, hidden in the shadows, waiting to be discovered. After the break-in, I knew I couldn't stay at my apartment. I packed a bag with essentials and checked into a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The anonymity of the place gave me a small sense of security. With my laptop destroyed and the flash drive missing, I felt like I had lost my lifeline to the truth. But I wasn't ready to give up. There had to be more to this story, and I was determined to find it. I decided to retrace my steps, starting with the forum where I first found Dr. X's post. To my dismay, the thread had been deleted, and Dr. X's account was gone. It was as if he had never existed. Panic began to set in. What if everything he told me was a lie? What if this was just an elaborate hoax? Then I remembered something Dr. X had said in one of our conversations. Always keep a backup. It was a vague statement, but it gave me hope. Maybe there was another way to access the information he had shared with me. I needed to get in touch with someone who could help me navigate the dark web and recover the lost data. I reached out to an old friend, Mark, who had a reputation for being a bit of a tech wizard. We hadn't spoken in years, but I hoped he would be willing to help. I explained my situation in vague terms, not wanting to reveal too much over the phone. He agreed to meet me at a local coffee shop the next day. When we met, I could see the skepticism in his eyes as I recounted my story, but to my relief, he didn't dismiss me outright. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully and asked a series of probing questions about the flash drive and its contents. "Do you remember anything specific about the files?" he asked. "Anything that might give us a clue?" I racked my brain, trying to recall the details. There were a lot of technical documents, equations, and diagrams. And there were photos of the UFO and its technology. One of the documents mentioned something about Project Timefall. Does that mean anything to you? Mark's eyes widened slightly. I've heard whispers about Project Timefall. It's supposed to be some kind of top-secret government project related to time manipulation. But it's all just rumors, nothing concrete. He agreed to help me dig deeper, but warned me to be cautious. If what you're saying is true, there are powerful people who won't hesitate to silence anyone who gets too close to the truth. Over the next few days, Mark and I worked together to recover the lost data. He used his skills to track down remnants of Dr. X's online presence, piecing together fragments of information that had been erased. Slowly but surely, we began to rebuild the puzzle. One night, as we pored over the recovered files in Mark's basement, we stumbled upon something chilling. Hidden among the technical documents was a series of journal entries written by Dr. X. They detailed his growing paranoia and fear of being discovered. One entry, dated just days before our meeting, stood out. "They're closing in. I can feel it. The things we've discovered, they're beyond comprehension. The technology can do things we thought were impossible. Time travel, teleportation. It's all real. But it's dangerous too. If it falls into the wrong hands, it could mean the end of everything. I have to get this information out there, but I don't know who to trust. If you're reading this, know that you're in danger. Trust no one." The journal entries painted a picture of a man on the brink of madness, haunted by the knowledge he had uncovered. But they also contained valuable clues about Project Timefall and the facility where the UFO was being studied. According to Dr. X, the facility was located in a remote, heavily guarded area known only as Site 47. Determined to uncover the truth, Mark and I began to plan our next move. We needed to find a way to get inside Site 47 and see the technology for ourselves. It was a risky plan, but it was the only way to validate Dr. X's claims. As we finalized our preparations, strange things began to happen. Mark's computer systems were hacked, our communications were intercepted, and we were followed by unmarked cars. It was clear that someone was watching us, trying to thwart our efforts. Despite the growing danger, we pressed on. The truth was too important to abandon. One night, as we sat in Mark's basement, he turned to me with a determined look in his eyes. "Are you sure you want to go through with this?" he asked. "There's no turning back once we start." I nodded, my resolve firm. We have to know the truth, for Dr. X, for ourselves, and for everyone out there who deserves to know what their government is hiding. With that, we set our plan into motion. We knew the risks, but we were prepared to face whatever came our way. The journey ahead would be perilous, but it was a path we had chosen willingly. And so, with a mixture of fear and excitement, we prepared to infiltrate Site-47, hoping to uncover the secrets of Project Timefall and the extraterrestrial technology that defied the laws of physics and time. Little did we know, our quest for the truth would lead us into a world of danger and intrigue beyond our wildest imaginations. Getting into Site-47 was no small feat. Mark and I spent weeks planning every detail, gathering intel and preparing for any possible scenario. We knew it was heavily guarded, with state-of-the-art security systems designed to keep people like us out. But we were determined, and our determination fueled our ingenuity. Using a combination of social engineering and hacking skills, Mark managed to obtain fake credentials and access codes. The plan was to pose as contractors hired for routine maintenance, giving us a legitimate reason to be there. It was risky, but it was our best shot. The night before the infiltration, we gathered all our equipment in Mark's basement. We packed small, portable cameras, a laptop with secure encryption, and a few other tools we thought might come in handy. As we double-checked everything, a sense of nervous anticipation hung in the air. "Remember," Mark said, his voice steady but serious, "we stick to the plan. No improvising unless absolutely necessary. And if things go south, we get out of there immediately. Understood?" I nodded, feeling a knot of anxiety in my stomach. Understood. The next morning, we arrived at the entrance of Site-47, our nerves hidden behind the calm facade of professionals going about their work. The security checkpoint was intimidating, with guards scrutinizing our credentials and equipment. But after what felt like an eternity, we were allowed inside. The facility was vast and sterile, a maze of corridors and rooms filled with cutting-edge technology. Our goal was to find the restricted area where the UFO and its technology were being studied. According to Dr. X's notes, it was located in the lower levels of the facility, accessible only with high-level clearance. As we navigated the labyrinthine halls, we passed labs filled with scientists working on various projects. Everything seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Mark's calm demeanor helped steady my nerves as we approached an elevator at the end of a secluded corridor. "This is it," he whispered, pressing a series of buttons that corresponded with the access codes we had obtained. The elevator doors slid open, and we stepped inside, descending into the depths of Site-47. The lower levels were even more secure, with biometric scanners and armed guards patrolling the area. We kept our heads down and moved quickly, avoiding unnecessary interactions. Finally, we reached a heavily fortified door marked Restricted Access. Using the credentials we had acquired, Mark bypassed the security systems and opened the door. Inside was a large, dimly lit room filled with strange machinery and devices that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie. And in the center of the room, covered by a large tarp, was the UFO. My heart raced as we approached the craft. Mark pulled back the tarp, revealing the sleek metallic surface beneath. It was smaller than I had imagined, but its design was undeniably otherworldly. As we examined it, we found various control panels and interfaces that defied conventional understanding. "This is incredible," Mark whispered, his eyes wide with awe. "The technology here, it's beyond anything humans have ever created." We began documenting everything, taking photos and notes, trying to understand the principles behind the technology. According to Dr. X's research, the craft could manipulate time and space using a complex array of energy fields and quantum particles. It was both fascinating and terrifying to consider the implications. As we worked, we discovered a small device embedded in the wall of the craft. It resembled the temporal displacement device Dr. X had shown me, but it was more advanced. Mark managed to extract it, carefully placing it in a secure case. We knew this was the key to understanding the true potential of the UFO. Suddenly, an alarm blared through the facility. Our cover had been blown. Mark and I exchanged a panicked glance and quickly gathered our equipment. We had to get out of there before the guards found us. We dashed through the corridors, our hearts pounding as we heard footsteps and shouts behind us. The elevator was too risky, so we took the stairs, descending further into the facility in a desperate attempt to escape. The sound of pursuit grew louder, and I knew we were running out of time. Just when it seemed like we were cornered, Mark spotted a maintenance hatch. We pried it open and crawled through a narrow tunnel, emerging outside the facility in a wooded area. Gasping for breath, we ran to our car and sped away, not daring to look back. As we drove, the reality of what we had just done began to sink in. We had infiltrated one of the most secure facilities in the world and uncovered secrets that could change everything. But we were also fugitives now, hunted by those who wanted to keep these secrets buried. Back at the motel, we reviewed the data we had collected. The device we had taken from the UFO was unlike anything we had ever seen. It seemed to be the key to manipulating time and space, just as Dr. X had described. But it also posed a great danger. If used improperly, it could have catastrophic consequences. We knew we couldn't keep this to ourselves. The world needed to know the truth. But how could we share our findings without putting ourselves and others in danger? As we pondered our next move, a sense of dread settled over us. We were in way over our heads, and there was no turning back. The truth was out there, and we had the evidence to prove it. But at what cost? The journey ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty, but we were committed to uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy and exposing the secrets of Site 47. With the data from Site 47 in our possession, Mark and I knew we had a limited window of time before we were found. Our motel room felt increasingly unsafe, and every shadow seemed to hide a threat. We needed a plan to reveal the truth to the world without being caught or silenced. Our first step was to secure our findings. We decided to create multiple backups of the data, hiding them in different locations and uploading encrypted copies to various secure online storage platforms. Mark's expertise in cybersecurity was invaluable here. He ensured our digital trail was as obscure as possible, making it harder for anyone to track us down. Once our data was secure, we began reaching out to trustworthy contacts. Mark had connections in the tech world, and I knew a few journalists who specialized in investigative reporting. We crafted anonymous messages, attaching snippets of the most compelling evidence to pique their interest. It was a gamble, but we hoped someone would take the bait. A few days later, we received a response from a well-known investigative journalist, Sarah, who had a reputation for exposing government cover-ups. She was intrigued by our claims and agreed to meet us in a public place to discuss further. We chose a crowded cafe downtown, thinking it would offer some protection against any potential threats. The meeting with Sarah went smoothly. We provided her with enough evidence to convince her of our story's authenticity without revealing too much. She promised to dig deeper and use her resources to verify the information. We knew it would take time, but it was a step in the right direction. As we waited for Sarah to complete her investigation, we continued to lay low, constantly changing locations and using cash to avoid leaving a trail. It was exhausting, living in a state of perpetual paranoia, but we couldn't afford to let our guard down. One night, as we were moving to a new safe house, Mark received an urgent message from one of his tech contacts. Someone had been asking about us, using sophisticated methods to track our movements. It was clear we were being hunted. Determined to stay one step ahead, we decided to confront our pursuers. Using a combination of digital sleight of hand and physical misdirection, we set a trap. We let our would-be hunters believe we were hiding out in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. From a safe distance, we watched as a group of black-clad operatives converged on the warehouse. They moved with precision, clearly professionals. Mark and I had rigged the building with cameras and microphones recording everything. As they searched the empty structure, we overheard their conversations, confirming our suspicions. "They must have known we were coming," one of them said. "We need to find them before they release any more information." Their leader, a stern-faced man with a commanding presence, responded, "Increase the surveillance. They're getting desperate. We can't let them expose Project Timefall." With this new evidence, we realized just how dangerous our situation had become. These people were willing to go to any lengths to protect their secrets. But it also meant we were on the right track. The truth was too important to abandon now. We sent the footage to Sarah, hoping it would bolster her investigation. In the meantime, we continued to stay on the move, always alert for any signs of pursuit. Every day felt like a battle for survival, but we were determined to see this through. A week later, Sarah contacted us with a breakthrough. She had verified the authenticity of our evidence and uncovered additional information about Project Timefall. It was a clandestine government program dedicated to reverse engineering alien technology, with a focus on manipulating time and space. The implications were staggering, and the potential for misuse was terrifying. Sarah planned to publish a comprehensive exposé, but she needed more evidence to make the story irrefutable. She asked us to find a way to get more concrete proof, something that could not be dismissed or buried. It was a daunting request, but we knew it was necessary. Mark and I devised a bold plan to return to Site-47 and retrieve more evidence. It was risky, but with Sarah's support and our knowledge of the facility, we believed we had a chance. We spent days preparing, gathering new credentials, and refining our strategy. On the night of the infiltration, we approached Site-47 with a mix of fear and determination. This time, we knew the layout better and had a clearer objective. As we navigated the facility's corridors, the weight of our mission pressed heavily on us. Failure was not an option. We reached the restricted area without incident, using the same tactics as before. Inside, we located a secure server room that housed the data we needed. Mark quickly accessed the system, copying files and downloading critical information. We worked swiftly, aware that our time was limited. Just as we were about to leave, the alarm sounded again. Our presence had been detected. We grabbed the data and made a dash for the exit, knowing we had only minutes before security converged on our location. The chase through the facility was a blur of adrenaline and fear. We narrowly avoided capture, using every trick we knew to evade our pursuers. When we finally reached the safety of our car, we sped away, hearts pounding with relief. Back at our safe house, we reviewed the new data. It was the final piece of the puzzle, irrefutable proof of Project Timefall's existence and its dangerous implications. We sent everything to Sarah, confident that her exposé would bring the truth to light. As we waited for the story to break, we remained in hiding, knowing that the fallout could be immense. The truth was about to be revealed, and the world would finally know the secrets of Site-47 and the advanced extraterrestrial technology it concealed. The tension in the air was palpable as we waited for Sarah's exposé to be published. The new evidence we had retrieved from Site-47 was our trump card, and we knew that once it was out there, there would be no going back. Mark and I stayed hidden, our every move calculated and cautious. The day the article went live, the internet exploded. Sarah's piece was thorough and damning, complete with the data we had gathered, the leaked documents, and the footage of the operatives who had tried to capture us. The story of Project Timefall and its implications for humanity spread like wildfire. News outlets picked it up, and soon it was the top story on every major network. Governments and officials were forced to respond. Denials, half-truths, and hastily prepared statements poured out, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. The public was outraged, demanding transparency and accountability. Protests erupted worldwide, and pressure mounted on those in power to come clean. Meanwhile, Mark and I remained in our safe house, monitoring the situation. The sense of relief was overwhelming. We had done it. The truth was out, and the world was paying attention. But we also knew that the danger was far from over. One evening, as we were discussing our next steps, there was a knock on the door. Our hearts stopped. We hadn't ordered food, and no one knew our location. Mark cautiously approached the door, peeking through the peephole. To our surprise, it was Sarah. We let her in, her expression serious but relieved. "You two need to get out of here," she said without preamble. "The people behind Project Timefall are desperate. They know you're the source, and they're coming for you." We had anticipated this, but hearing it from Sarah made it all the more real. She handed us a folder with new identities, travel documents, and a detailed plan for disappearing. "I've arranged for you to leave the country. There's a safe place where you can start over, but you have to move now." We didn't waste any time. Gathering our few belongings, we followed Sarah's plan, moving swiftly and silently. It was a bittersweet moment. We had sacrificed our lives as we knew them, but we had done something meaningful. We had revealed a truth that would change the world. As we traveled to our new destination, a remote and quiet place far from prying eyes, we kept an eye on the news. The fallout from the exposé continued to grow. Governments around the world were forced to admit their involvement in secret projects related to extraterrestrial technology. Scientists began openly discussing the implications of time and space manipulation, and humanity took its first steps toward understanding and potentially harnessing these advanced technologies. The truth had indeed come to light, but the journey was just beginning. The world now knew about Project Timefall, and the knowledge of alien technology was out in the open. It was a time of great uncertainty, but also of immense possibility. Humanity stood on the brink of a new era, with all the dangers and opportunities that came with it. Mark and I settled into our new lives, always vigilant but hopeful. We stayed in touch with Sarah, who continued her work as a journalist, uncovering truths and holding those in power accountable. Our contribution to her exposé was just one chapter in the ongoing story of humanity's encounter with the unknown. Reflecting on everything that had happened, I realized that we had done something incredible. We had faced danger and uncertainty to reveal a truth that could reshape the future. And while we had to leave our old lives behind, we had found a new purpose. The world was changing, and we had played a part in that transformation. In our quiet, hidden corner of the world, Mark and I continued our work, always seeking to understand more about the mysteries we had uncovered. The journey had been harrowing, but it had also been worth it. The truth was out there, and it was now in the hands of humanity to decide what to do with it. And so our story ended not with a sense of finality, but with a beginning of a new chapter for us, for humanity, and for the endless pursuit of knowledge and truth. Thank you for following our journey. Stay safe, stay curious, and always seek the truth. Always seek. I've always been a sucker for urban legends and conspiracy theories. Not that I necessarily believe in them, but there's something about the thrill of the unknown that keeps me hooked. So naturally, when I stumbled upon a dark web forum claiming to have insider information about Area 51, I couldn't resist diving in. It was a stormy night, the kind where the wind howls and the rain pelts against the windows like tiny bullets. I had just settled in with my laptop, the screen casting an eerie glow in my dark room. As I navigated through the murky depths of the dark web, I found a thread titled "Secrets of Area 51, Ex-Prisoner's Testimony." It had a surprising number of replies, and curiosity got the better of me. The original post was by a user named Escaped Our Experiment. He claimed to be a former prisoner at Area 51, captured because he had stumbled upon something so dangerous that the government couldn't risk letting him out. He started with a chilling introduction about how he ended up there, recounting a life of scientific research that took a dark turn. According to his posts, he was a scientist working on a top-secret project when he discovered a new element, something that could change the world in ways we couldn't even begin to comprehend. He didn't go into much detail about the element itself, probably because he assumed most of us wouldn't understand the scientific jargon, but he did mention that this element had the potential to either save humanity or doom it, depending on how it was used. What really caught my attention, though, was his story of escape. He wrote about how a severe thunderstorm had hit the base one night, causing a temporary power outage. In the chaos that ensued, he managed to slip past the security and make a run for it. His posts were filled with a sense of urgency and fear, as if he was still looking over his shoulder, expecting to be caught at any moment. He uploaded photos and videos as proof. The photos were blurry and could easily be dismissed as fakes, but the videos were another story. One showed a dimly lit corridor with uniformed guards patrolling. Another showed a laboratory with strange glowing equipment. There was even a clip of what looked like an underground tunnel system. It was all so surreal, yet somehow it felt real. Of course, I was skeptical. The internet is full of hoaxes, and this could easily be one of them. But there was something about his writing, the way he described his fear and the details of his escape, that made it hard to dismiss outright. He claimed that after he escaped, he went into hiding, constantly moving from place to place to avoid being caught. He posted sporadically, each time from a different location, sharing snippets of his experience and urging us to spread the word. He also shared some of his research, though I barely understood any of it. Complex equations, diagrams, and scientific theories that went way over my head. But it was clear that he believed he was on to something big, something that the government was desperate to keep under wraps. As I read through the thread, a sense of unease settled over me. It wasn't just the storm outside that had me on edge. The idea that someone could be out there, running for their life because they discovered something too powerful for the world to know, was deeply unsettling, and the fact that this person had chosen to share their story on a shady dark web forum added a layer of creepiness to the whole situation. I spent hours scrolling through the comments, some of which were supportive, while others called him a fraud. But no matter what anyone said, Escaped Experiment kept posting, sharing more and more details about his life on the run and the secrets of Area 51. By the time I logged off, it was well past midnight. The storm had subsided, but the unease lingered. As I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had stumbled onto something I wasn't meant to see. I wasn't sure if his story was true, but one thing was certain: I was hooked, and I knew I had to keep following his posts, no matter where they led. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey into a world of secrets and dangers far beyond my imagination. The next morning, I couldn't shake off the events of the previous night. Over breakfast, my mind kept wandering back to Escaped Experiment and his harrowing story. The dark web forum had become my new obsession, and I felt a strange compulsion to log back on and check for updates. When I finally did, I noticed that the thread had gained even more traction. The discussion was now teeming with theories, both from skeptics and believers. Some users claimed to have recognized elements of the scientific data that Escaped Experiment had shared, while others pointed out inconsistencies. I wasn't sure what to believe, but I knew I had to dig deeper. In one of his latest posts, Escaped Experiment talked about the element he discovered in more detail. He called it Element X, a name that sounded like it belonged in a science fiction novel. He described its properties as being unlike anything currently known to science. According to him, Element X had the ability to generate an immense amount of energy from very little material, making it a potential solution to the world's energy crisis. But, he warned, it also had the potential to be weaponized in ways that could lead to catastrophic consequences. He posted a video showing what appeared to be a small, glowing crystal in a lab setting. He demonstrated how a tiny fragment of the crystal could light up a bulb for hours without any external power source. The video was mesmerizing and terrifying at the same time. If what he claimed was true, then Element X could indeed change the world for better or worse. The comments section exploded with debates. Some users called for the information to be shared with the public, arguing that humanity had a right to know. Others cautioned against it, fearing that such powerful knowledge could fall into the wrong hands. Meanwhile, Escaped Experiment continued to post sporadically, each time providing more details about his life on the run. One post that particularly stood out was when he recounted the night of his escape in vivid detail. He described the thunderstorm that had acted as his unlikely ally. The lightning had struck close to the base, causing a power surge that shorted out the security systems. He had seized the opportunity, navigating the dark corridors with only the occasional flash of lightning to guide him. He spoke of narrowly avoiding guards and using hidden passageways that only a few knew about. He also mentioned a close call with a helicopter that had been dispatched to search for him. The way he described hiding in the dense underbrush, barely breathing as the searchlight swept over him, sent chills down my spine. It was like something out of a movie, yet he insisted every word was true. Despite my growing fascination, a part of me remained skeptical. The internet is full of elaborate hoaxes, and it was entirely possible that this was just an elaborate story concocted by a talented writer. But the level of detail and the scientific information he provided made it hard to dismiss completely. In one of his posts, he shared coordinates of a remote location where he had taken refuge for a while. Curious, I entered the coordinates into Google Maps. The location was in the middle of a vast desert, miles away from any signs of civilization. It seemed like the perfect place for someone to hide, but it also raised more questions. How was he surviving out there? Did he have help? The mystery deepened. As days turned into weeks, I found myself checking the forum multiple times a day. The community around Escaped Experiment grew, with people from all over the world chiming in. Some claimed to have connections in high places and promised to help him, while others offered theories and analysis of his data. The atmosphere was a mix of camaraderie and tension, as everyone seemed to sense the gravity of the situation. One night, as I was reading through the latest posts, a new user appeared in the thread. Their username was ShadowGov, and they claimed to be a government insider. They warned everyone to stop interacting with Escaped Experiment, stating that his information was classified and that sharing it was a serious offense. The post was immediately met with backlash, with many accusing ShadowGov of trying to silence the truth. But it got me thinking, what if this was real? What if we were all playing a part in something much bigger and more dangerous than we realized? The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. As I lay in bed that night, listening to the distant rumble of thunder, I couldn't help but feel a sense of impending doom. Whether Escaped Experiment was a genius, a madman, or a fraud, one thing was clear. I was in too deep to turn back now. The dark web had its hooks in me, and the secrets of Area 51 were just beginning to unravel. The tension in the forum was palpable after the appearance of ShadowGov. Debates raged on, with some users taking the threat seriously and others dismissing it as a scare tactic. I found myself increasingly paranoid, wondering if my own curiosity had put me on some watch list. Despite the fear, I couldn't pull myself away from the unfolding drama. A few days later, Escaped Experiment posted again, but this time his tone was different. He sounded more desperate, more frantic. He said that he had narrowly escaped an attempt to capture him. According to him, black SUVs had shown up at his latest hideout, and he had only just managed to slip away. He believed that his pursuers were getting closer, and he feared that they might eventually catch up to him. He shared another piece of his research, something he claimed was the most crucial part of his discovery. It was a blueprint of a device that could harness the energy of element X. Again, the science was way over my head, but the implications were clear. If someone could build this device, they could have access to an almost limitless source of power. But as always, he warned of the dangers. He wrote about how the energy could be unstable, how it could lead to catastrophic failures if not handled correctly. The forum was in a frenzy. Some users began trying to decipher the blueprints, while others argued about the ethical implications of releasing such information. ShadowGov continued to post warnings, but now there were others who claimed to be from various government agencies, all trying to either discredit Escaped Experiment or convince him to stop sharing his findings. In one particularly chilling post, Escaped Experiment recounted an incident where he had been cornered in an abandoned warehouse. He described hiding in the shadows, holding his breath as armed men swept the building. He said he could hear their footsteps, the murmur of their radios. At one point, one of them came so close he could see the man's boots from his hiding spot. Somehow he had managed to slip out a back window and disappear into the night. He also shared a grainy video taken from his phone, showing the men in tactical gear searching the warehouse. The video was shaky and hard to make out, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. It was one thing to read about his narrow escapes, but seeing even a blurry video brought a new level of reality to the situation. Around this time, I began receiving strange emails. They were from anonymous addresses, warning me to stop following the thread and delete any related files. Some were polite, almost concerned for my well-being, while others were downright threatening. It was unsettling, but it also made me more determined to see this through. If someone was trying so hard to keep this quiet, then there had to be something to it. I wasn't the only one. Many users on the forum reported similar experiences. Some even claimed to have seen suspicious vehicles parked near their homes, or to have been followed by unmarked cars. It was like something out of a thriller novel, and the sense of danger was almost intoxicating. Despite the risks, Escaped Experiment continued to post, albeit less frequently. He shared more about the experiments conducted at Area 51, describing in horrifying detail how they tested the limits of Element X. He spoke of accidents that had occurred, resulting in containment breaches and severe injuries. He claimed that some of the scientists had become so obsessed with the potential of Element X that they ignored the risks, pushing the boundaries further and further. One story he shared was particularly disturbing. He wrote about a colleague who had tried to harness the energy of Element X in a small-scale experiment. Something had gone wrong, and there had been an explosion. The colleague had survived, but had been badly injured. Rather than being taken to a hospital, he was whisked away by security, and no one ever saw him again. The official story was that he had been transferred to a different project, but Escaped Experiment believed he had been silenced. The forum began to feel like a community under siege. Users shared tips on how to stay safe, how to avoid being tracked online. There were discussions about encryption, VPNs, and other methods to protect our identities. It was a strange camaraderie, brought together by a shared sense of danger and intrigue. One night, as I was scrolling through the latest posts, my internet suddenly cut out. At first, I thought it was just a glitch, but then my phone rang. The caller ID was blocked, and when I answered, there was nothing but silence on the other end. I hung up, my heart pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. When my internet finally came back on, I found a new message in my inbox. It was from Escaped Experiment. He had sent it to several users on the forum, a desperate plea for help. He believed he had found a way to expose everything, but he needed our assistance. He wanted us to spread the information as widely as possible, to make it impossible for the truth to be suppressed. I didn't know what to think. Part of me wanted to back out, to delete everything and pretend I had never stumbled upon this dark web thread. But another part of me, the part that craved the thrill of the unknown, knew I couldn't walk away now. I was in too deep, and there was no turning back. The next few days were a blur of activity on the forum. People began organizing, sharing the information far and wide. We knew we were playing a dangerous game, but the sense of purpose was undeniable. We were all part of something bigger, something that felt both thrilling and terrifying. As I sat at my computer preparing to share the latest piece of evidence, I couldn't help but wonder, what if we succeeded? What if the truth really did come out? And what if the consequences were more than we could ever imagine? The storm outside had returned, lightning flashing in the distance. The power flickered, and for a moment, my screen went dark. When it came back on, there was a new post from Escaped Experiment, one that promised to reveal the final piece of the puzzle. Little did I know, the most shocking revelations were yet to come. The storm outside continued to rage as I clicked on the latest post from Escaped Experiment. This one was different, longer, more detailed, and filled with a sense of finality. It was as if he knew this might be his last message to us. He began by thanking everyone for their support and bravery in sharing his story. He acknowledged the risks we were all taking and urged us to stay safe. Then, he got to the heart of the matter, the final piece of his revelation. According to Escaped Experiment, the discovery of Element X had far-reaching implications that went beyond what he had previously shared. This element, he explained, had the potential to not only revolutionize energy production, but also to alter the very fabric of our reality. He spoke of experiments that delved into the realm of quantum physics, hinting at the possibility of alternate dimensions and parallel universes. He described how, during his time at Area 51, the scientists had begun to uncover these hidden dimensions. They had used Element X to create small, stable portals, windows into other realities. These experiments, he claimed, had shown glimpses of worlds both eerily similar and vastly different from our own. Some were utopias, while others were dystopian nightmares. The higher-ups at Area 51 had been both fascinated and terrified by these findings. The potential applications were staggering. New resources, new technologies, and even new forms of life. But the dangers were equally significant. What if something came through one of those portals? What if opening these windows could destabilize our own reality? Escaped Experiment posted a series of photos and videos purportedly showing these portals. The images were grainy and dark, but they clearly depicted strange, shimmering fields of light, like ripples in the air. In one video, a small robotic probe was sent through a portal, disappearing into the unknown. The video cut off before it showed what happened next, leaving us all hanging in suspense. The forum went into overdrive. The comments section exploded with theories, questions, and expressions of disbelief. Some users tried to debunk the photos and videos, while others were convinced of their authenticity. The sense of urgency was palpable, and the stakes felt higher than ever. In his final message, Escaped Experiment revealed that he had hidden a crucial piece of evidence somewhere in the Nevada desert, not far from Area 51. He provided cryptic clues to its location, urging us to find it and bring it to light. This evidence, he claimed, would prove everything he had said and force the world to confront the truth. I felt a chill run down my spine as I read his words. The idea of venturing into the desert to uncover hidden evidence sounded like something out of a spy thriller, yet it felt all too real. Part of me wanted to go, to be a part of this incredible discovery, but another part of me was scared. What if it was a trap? What if we were being watched, our every move monitored? Over the next few days, several users on the forum began organizing a search party. They exchanged contact information, planned routes, and gathered supplies. The excitement was infectious, but so was the fear. There were whispers of people being followed, of mysterious cars parked outside homes, and even of users disappearing without a trace. Then, one night, as I was reading through the latest updates, my phone rang again. This time the caller spoke. It was a calm, measured voice warning me to stop. They knew who I was, where I lived, and even details about my family. The message was clear. If I continued down this path, there would be consequences. I hung up, my hands shaking. The fear was real now, more real than it had ever been. I realized that this wasn't just an online adventure anymore. It was something dangerous, something that could have real-world repercussions. Despite the fear, I couldn't shake off the feeling that we were on the verge of something monumental. The world deserved to know the truth, and we were the ones who could bring it to light. But at what cost? The forum became quieter as users went dark, presumably heading into the desert or going underground to avoid detection. I found myself checking in less frequently, the fear gnawing at me, but I couldn't completely turn away. I needed to know how it all ended, whether we would succeed in uncovering the truth or if escaped experiment would be silenced forever. One final message appeared from escaped experiment, short and to the point. He was on the run again, but he had faith in us. He believed we could find the evidence and make it public. His last words were a plea: don't let them bury the truth. As the days passed, the storm outside finally abated, but the storm within the forum continued to rage. People were still searching, still debating, still hoping for a breakthrough. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were part of something much bigger than ourselves, a small group of truth seekers facing off against forces we could barely comprehend. And so I waited, watched, and hoped. The final chapter of this story was yet to be written, and I could only pray that it would end with the truth coming to light, no matter the cost. Days turned into weeks, and the forum became eerily quiet. The once lively discussions and heated debates had dwindled as many users went silent. The search party, which had set out to find the hidden evidence in the Nevada desert, had not reported back. The sense of unease grew stronger with each passing day. Then one evening, just as I was beginning to lose hope, a new post appeared. It was from one of the users who had joined the search party. Their username was Desert Seeker, and their message was brief but electrifying. We found it. The post contained a link to a live stream, and within minutes hundreds of users had joined to watch. The screen flickered to life, showing a group of dusty, exhausted people standing in a barren landscape. In the background, the iconic silhouette of the Nevada mountains loomed large. Desert Seeker spoke directly to the camera. They explained that after days of searching, following the cryptic clues left by escaped experiment, they had found a small metal box buried in a remote part of the desert. The box was sealed and secured with a combination lock. Using the final clue, they had managed to open it. Inside, they found a USB drive and a handwritten note from escaped experiment. The note urged them to share the contents of the drive with the world. It also contained a warning. The information was highly sensitive and could put their lives at risk. With bated breath, we watched as Desert Seeker plugged the USB drive into a laptop. The screen filled with files, documents, videos, and images. They began to open the files one by one, sharing the screen with us. The first document was a detailed report on Element X, complete with scientific analyses, test results, and theoretical applications. It was clear and concise, written in a way that even those without a scientific background could understand. The potential of Element X was undeniable, but so were the risks. Next came the videos. These were the most compelling evidence yet. The first video showed a controlled experiment in a high-security lab, demonstrating the incredible energy potential of Element X. The second video was more disturbing. It showed the aftermath of an experiment gone wrong, with scientists scrambling to contain a breach and alarms blaring in the background. But the most shocking video was the final one. It was a covert recording, taken by escaped experiment himself. In the video, he confronted a high-ranking official at Area 51, demanding answers about the true purpose of their experiments. The official's response was chilling. They spoke of a shadowy agenda, of plans to use Element X to control not just energy, but the very fabric of reality itself. It was a glimpse into a world of power and manipulation far beyond anything we could have imagined. The live stream erupted with reactions. People were stunned, horrified, and outraged. The evidence was undeniable. Element X was real, and the government had been hiding its true potential and dangers from the world. The truth was finally out. Desert Seeker ended the stream with a call to action. They urged everyone watching to share the information far and wide to ensure that it couldn't be suppressed. The forum lit up with activity as users began downloading and distributing the files across the internet. Social media, news outlets, and even mainstream media began picking up the story. In the following days, the revelations about Element X became a global sensation. Governments were forced to respond, and investigations were launched. The world was finally waking up to the truth that escaped experiment had risked everything to reveal. As for me, the experience left me with a mix of awe and unease. I had been a part of something extraordinary, a collective effort to uncover a hidden truth. But it had also shown me the dark side of our pursuit of knowledge and power. Escaped Experiment remained in hiding, his whereabouts unknown. But his legacy lived on in the files and the knowledge that had been set free. The world had changed, and there was no going back. Even now, as I look back on those tense, thrilling weeks, I can't help but wonder what other secrets lie hidden, waiting to be discovered. The dark web forum is still active, though much quieter than before. People continue to share theories and seek out the unknown, driven by the same curiosity that led me to Escaped Experiment in the first place. And every so often, on stormy nights when the wind howls and the rain pelts against my window, I find myself drawn back to the forum, wondering if another truth is waiting to be uncovered, another secret ready to be revealed. Because in the end, the search for the unknown never truly ends. I've always been a bit of a night owl, often staying up late to surf the web when the world is quiet and my thoughts are clear. One night, about 2 months ago, I found myself wandering into the more obscure corners of the internet. It's not something I do often, but curiosity got the better of me. I stumbled upon a link to the dark web in a forum discussing conspiracy theories. With a mix of excitement and apprehension, I decided to explore. After a while of browsing through various pages filled with illegal and disturbing content, which I quickly skipped past, I found a video that piqued my interest. The title was simple: UFO Evidence, They Don't Want You to See This. As a longtime skeptic yet hopeful believer in extraterrestrial life, I couldn't resist clicking on it. The video began with a shaky camera aimed at a dark sky. The person behind the camera seemed nervous, whispering frantically about strange lights he'd been seeing over his property for the past few nights. Suddenly, a bright object appeared, hovering silently above the trees. It wasn't like any aircraft I'd ever seen. It moved with an eerie smoothness, changing directions in ways that defied the laws of physics. What really caught my attention was the man's commentary. He spoke with a conviction that was hard to ignore, insisting that the government was aware of these sightings and was actively covering them up. The man panned the camera to show his surroundings, a rural area with dense woods. He pointed out how he had noticed unmarked black cars parked near his property ever since he started recording these phenomena. About 10 minutes into the video, things took a dramatic turn. The man's voice became frantic as he noticed headlights approaching from the distance. He tried to remain calm but kept glancing nervously over his shoulder. The vehicle stopped and men in dark uniforms emerged, demanding he hand over his phone. He refused, shouting that the world needed to see the truth. The situation escalated quickly. The screen went black, but the audio continued, capturing the sounds of a struggle, the man's panicked shouts, and finally a chilling silence. I was left staring at my screen, heart pounding. My immediate thought was that it had to be a hoax, some elaborate prank or part of a viral marketing campaign. But beneath the video there was a series of comments from other users who claimed to have seen similar things. Some even shared their own recordings and stories of mysterious men showing up at their homes. One comment in particular stood out. It was from a user named TruthSeeker101, who claimed to know the man in the video. According to him, the man was now on the run, hiding from authorities who wanted to silence him. Truth Seeker 101 warned that anyone who shared the video or spoke about it could be targeted next. I closed my laptop, a sense of unease settling over me. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Unmarked cars began appearing in my neighborhood, parked in inconspicuous places but never for too long. I told myself it was just my imagination running wild, a result of the creepy video I'd watched the night before. But as days turned into weeks, the sense of paranoia only grew. My phone would randomly light up with notifications that disappeared before I could read them, and my internet connection seemed slower than usual. Every time I walked my dog, I couldn't help but feel eyes on me, hidden in the shadows of my quiet suburban street. That's when I decided to reach out to Truth Seeker 101. I needed to know more about the man in the video and what he'd uncovered. Little did I know, this decision would pull me deeper into a web of secrets and danger I was woefully unprepared for. After a few days of trying to convince myself that my paranoia was just that, paranoia, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I spent hours online, searching for any information I could find about UFO sightings and government cover-ups. It seemed like the more I looked, the more I found. Stories of strange encounters, missing people, and unexplained phenomena started to blend together in my mind, forming a mosaic of mystery that was impossible to ignore. One evening, after another frustrating day of dodging unmarked cars and dodgy internet connections, I finally worked up the courage to contact Truth Seeker 101. I logged back onto the dark web and found the video thread again. My hands were shaking as I typed out a message, introducing myself and explaining that I had seen the video. I asked for more information about the man in the video and his current situation. To my surprise, Truth Seeker 101 responded almost immediately. He was cautious at first, asking me how I had found the video and what my intentions were. I explained that I was just a curious bystander who stumbled upon the video and couldn't ignore the eerie feeling it left me with. I wanted to know the truth. He finally opened up, telling me that the man in the video was named Mark, a quiet, unassuming guy who lived alone on a small farm. Mark had always been a bit of a loner, but his life took a strange turn about 6 months ago when he started noticing bright lights in the sky above his property. At first, he thought they were just drones or planes, but as the sightings became more frequent and the lights more erratic, he decided to start recording them. According to Truth Seeker 101, Mark had managed to capture some of the clearest footage of unidentified flying objects he had ever seen. But it wasn't just the footage that was disturbing. It was the strange occurrences that followed. Mark began finding dead animals on his property, and his phone and internet connections were constantly being disrupted. He even claimed that he had been visited by men in black suits who warned him to stop recording and forget what he had seen. But Mark didn't back down. He continued to record, posting his videos on obscure parts of the internet, trying to get the word out. That's when the unmarked cars started showing up, and Mark realized he was being watched. The video I had seen was one of his last attempts to share his findings before he had to go into hiding. Truth Seeker 101 sent me a link to a private chat room where Mark occasionally posted updates. I hesitated for a moment, then clicked the link and joined. The chat room was mostly silent, with only a few messages from Mark detailing his movements and the strange things he was experiencing. He seemed to be constantly on the move, staying one step ahead of the authorities. One message caught my eye. Mark mentioned that he had hidden a backup of all his footage in a safe place, just in case anything happened to him. He provided cryptic clues about its location, urging anyone who found it to share the truth with the world. I spent the next few days piecing together the clues, driven by a mix of curiosity and a sense of duty. Each clue led me deeper into a puzzle that was both fascinating and terrifying. I found myself visiting places I'd never been, searching for something I wasn't even sure existed. The more I dug, the more real the danger felt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed, but I was too deep in to back out now. Late one night, I finally cracked the last clue. It led me to an old abandoned building on the outskirts of town. I knew I had to go, despite the gnawing fear in my gut. I packed a bag with essentials and set out under the cover of darkness. The building was as eerie as I had imagined, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. I made my way inside, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Following Mark's instructions, I found a hidden compartment beneath a loose floorboard. Inside was a small waterproof container. My heart raced as I opened it, revealing a USB drive and a handwritten note from Mark. The note was a warning, telling me to be careful and trust no one. The USB drive contained all of his footage and detailed notes on everything he had experienced. I left the building, clutching the container tightly. As I walked back to my car, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced around, but the street was empty. I told myself it was just my imagination, but deep down, I knew the real danger was only just beginning. Back home, I locked my doors and closed the curtains before sitting down at my desk. I plugged the USB drive into my computer, my heart pounding in my chest. The drive contained a single folder labeled Truth. Inside, there were dozens of video files, each meticulously labeled with dates and brief descriptions. There were also text documents filled with Mark's observations and theories. I decided to start with the earliest video. The footage was shaky at first, but soon stabilized as Mark adjusted his camera. It was the same rural setting I recognized from the original video. His farmhouse bathed in the light of a full moon. He panned the camera to the sky, capturing the first of many strange lights. The object moved silently, its lights pulsating rhythmically. Mark's voice, calm and steady, narrated the scene, noting the time, weather conditions, and any other pertinent details. Each subsequent video showed similar sightings, but the objects became increasingly bizarre. Some hovered in place, while others moved with impossible speed. Mark documented everything with a scientist's precision, clearly determined to gather as much evidence as possible. But it wasn't just the UFO footage that was disturbing. As I went through the files, I found videos of the aftermath of some of Mark's encounters. One showed a mutilated deer, its injuries inexplicable and gruesome. Another showed scorch marks on the ground, arranged in strange geometric patterns. There were even videos of shadowy figures lurking near his property, always just out of clear view, but undeniably human. Mark's notes were equally unsettling. He wrote about sleepless nights filled with the sound of footsteps outside his window and the feeling of being watched even when he was inside his locked house. He described how his phone calls were often interrupted by static and how he frequently saw the same black cars parked at the edge of his property. He believed that the government, or some shadowy organization, was trying to intimidate him into silence. One of the most chilling entries detailed a visit from two men in dark suits. Mark described how they showed up at his door one afternoon, their demeanor polite but menacing. They asked to come inside, claiming they were from a government agency investigating unusual aerial activity. Mark let them in, trying to act casual, but he could feel their eyes scanning his home, searching for something. They asked him about his sightings, hinting that it would be best for him to forget about them and move on. When Mark refused, they left, but not before one of them leaned in close and whispered, "Some truths are better left hidden." I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of dread as I read through Mark's files. This wasn't just a story about UFO sightings. It was about a man being pushed to the brink by forces he couldn't understand or fight. The more I delved into his recordings and notes, the more convinced I became that Mark was telling the truth. The evidence was too detailed, too consistent to be a fabrication. As I was absorbed in the files, a sudden noise jolted me out of my concentration. It was a faint tapping sound, like someone knocking on a window. I froze, my heart racing. The noise came again, this time louder. I forced myself to get up and check, peeking through the curtains. There was no one there. I told myself it was just my imagination, fueled by the disturbing videos and notes. Determined to finish what I started, I went back to my computer. I copied all the files from the USB drive to a secure cloud storage, ensuring that Mark's evidence wouldn't be lost if something happened to me. I also decided to share some of the footage with a few trusted friends who were tech-savvy and interested in conspiracy theories. If I was being targeted, I needed allies who could help me get the truth out. Over the next few days, I received mixed reactions. Some friends were skeptical, suggesting it was all an elaborate hoax. Others were genuinely concerned and offered their support. One friend, a computer programmer named Alex, was particularly intrigued. He offered to analyze the footage for any signs of tampering or digital manipulation. Meanwhile, the feeling of being watched intensified. The unmarked cars became a constant presence, and I started noticing people following me when I left the house. They were always subtle, always at a distance, but undeniably there. My phone would buzz with strange, untraceable numbers, and my internet connection remained frustratingly unreliable. One evening, Alex called me with urgent news. He had gone through the footage and confirmed that there was no evidence of tampering. The videos were genuine, and the phenomena they captured were real. He also found something else, an encrypted file buried deep within the USB drive. It was heavily protected, but Alex was confident he could crack it, given enough time. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head. Mark's story was becoming my own, and the line between curiosity and danger was blurring rapidly. The encrypted file felt like the key to everything, but unlocking it meant diving even deeper into a world of secrets and shadows. I drifted off to sleep with the thought that there were truths out there that people would kill to protect, and I was on the verge of uncovering one of them. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of urgency. The encrypted file Alex had discovered felt like the missing piece of the puzzle. I called him immediately, eager to hear about any progress he had made overnight. To my relief, Alex picked up on the first ring. "Hey, I've got good news and bad news," he began, sounding both excited and anxious. "The good news is that I've managed to decrypt part of the file. The bad news is that it's going to take a lot more time to get through the rest of it. This thing is like Fort Knox." "What did you find so far?" I asked, my heart pounding. "There are some documents and audio files," Alex explained. "The documents are mostly technical notes, probably from Mark, detailing the specifications of the UFOs he recorded. The audio files are more interesting. They seem to be conversations Mark had with some pretty important people." My curiosity was piqued. "What kind of conversations?" "Government officials, scientists, and a few people who sound like they might be part of some clandestine organization," Alex replied. "They're talking about the UFO sightings, but there's a lot of jargon and code names. It's going to take some time to make sense of it all." "Send me whatever you have decrypted so far," I said. "I'll start going through it. Maybe together we can piece this thing together faster." Alex agreed, and within minutes, files began appearing in my inbox. I opened the first document, a technical report filled with diagrams and notes about the flight patterns and physical characteristics of the UFOs Mark had recorded. It was clear that Mark had done his homework. He wasn't just a random guy with a camera. He had a background in physics and aeronautics, and his observations were meticulous. The audio files were even more intriguing. I played the first one, listening to Mark's voice as he spoke with a man who identified himself as Dr. Reinhardt. They discussed the propulsion systems of the UFOs, speculating that they utilized some form of advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. Dr. Reinhardt sounded both fascinated and terrified, warning Mark that he was delving into dangerous territory. As I continued to listen, it became apparent that Mark had been in contact with several experts who were all equally alarmed by what he had uncovered. They spoke in hushed tones about a cover-up, referring to a project codenamed Blacklight. According to them, Blacklight was a top-secret initiative designed to investigate and, if necessary, neutralize any threats posed by extraterrestrial technology. The more I heard, the more it became clear that Mark was not just being paranoid. The stakes were incredibly high, and powerful forces were determined to keep the truth hidden. Hours passed as I sifted through the files, my mind racing with the implications of what I was discovering. The sense of being watched never left me, and I found myself glancing nervously out the window every few minutes. The unmarked cars were still there, a constant reminder that I was now part of something much bigger than myself. Just as I was about to call Alex with my latest findings, my phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before answering, my voice shaking slightly. Hello? Is this the person who's been digging into Mark's files? The voice on the other end was calm, but there was an edge to it that made my skin crawl. Who is this? I asked, trying to sound braver than I felt. You need to stop, the voice continued, ignoring my question. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. This isn't just about UFOs. It's about national security. Walk away now before it's too late. The call ended abruptly, leaving me with a dial tone and a sinking feeling in my stomach. I quickly called Alex, my hands trembling. Alex, I just got a threatening call. Someone knows what we're doing. There was a pause before Alex responded. We knew this might happen. Look, we're too close to the truth to back down now. I've got your back, and I'm sure Mark would want us to see this through. Just be careful, okay? I agreed, but the conversation left me more rattled than ever. As night fell, I decided to sleep with my laptop and phone close by, ready to grab them at a moment's notice. I had a feeling things were about to get even more intense. The next few days were a blur of paranoia and discovery. Alex and I continued to decrypt the files, uncovering more and more evidence of a vast conspiracy. Mark's notes included references to government documents and emails from high-ranking officials, all discussing the existence of extraterrestrial technology and the lengths they would go to keep it secret. One evening, Alex called me with a breakthrough. I've decrypted another significant chunk of the file, he said, his voice tense with excitement. You're not going to believe this. What is it? I asked, bracing myself. There's a video, Alex replied. It's a recording of a meeting between several government officials and military personnel. They're discussing Mark's footage and debating what to do about him. They mentioned something about a planned operation to silence him permanently. My blood ran cold. This was the smoking gun, proof that Mark's fears were justified and that his life was in real danger. I knew we had to get this information out, but the question was how. As I pondered our next move, my phone buzzed with another message from an unknown number. This time, it was a text. Final warning, stop now, or face the consequences. I showed the message to Alex, and we both knew there was no turning back. We had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. After the chilling text, Alex and I knew we were in real danger. The pieces of the puzzle were almost complete, and we had to act fast. Our first step was to secure our findings. We decided to create multiple backups of the decrypted files, storing them on encrypted cloud services and distributing copies to trusted friends and family. If anything happened to us, the truth would still get out. The next morning, I received an unexpected email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "Urgent, meet me tonight." The message contained instructions to meet at a public park after dark. I hesitated, but the sense of urgency and the stakes involved left me with little choice. I informed Alex, who agreed to come with me for safety. As night fell, we drove to the park, parking a few blocks away to avoid drawing attention. We made our way to the designated meeting spot, a bench near a dimly lit pathway. We sat in tense silence, scanning the area for any signs of our contact or potential threats. After what felt like an eternity, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was an older man, dressed in a plain jacket and jeans. He approached cautiously, glancing around nervously before sitting down beside us. "Are you the ones looking into Mark's files?" he asked in a hushed tone. Yes, I replied, my heart racing. Who are you? Call me John, he said. I worked with Mark. I was part of the team investigating these sightings before things went south. When I realized what they were planning to do to him, I had to disappear. John explained that he had been a scientist in a covert government project aimed at studying UFO phenomena. The project, known as Blacklight, had uncovered undeniable evidence of extraterrestrial technology. However, as the findings grew more alarming, the project shifted from research to containment and cover-up. Mark's recordings were the most compelling evidence yet, and the government saw him as a threat that needed to be neutralized. I've been in hiding ever since, John continued. But when I saw the files you decrypted, I knew I had to reach out. Mark's evidence is the key to exposing the truth, but you need to be careful. They will stop at nothing to keep this secret. John handed us a small envelope. Inside was a key and an address to a storage unit on the outskirts of town. This is where Mark hid the most crucial evidence, he said. You need to get it out there before it's too late. With renewed determination, Alex and I thanked John and headed straight to the storage unit. The address led us to a nondescript facility, the kind of place you'd never give a second glance. We used the key to open a small, dusty unit. Inside, we found a battered metal box. We pried it open to reveal a treasure trove of documents, hard drives, and physical evidence, everything Mark had painstakingly gathered over the months. Among the items was a detailed dossier outlining the entire Blacklight project, complete with names, dates, and operations. There were photos of the UFOs, physical samples of unknown materials, and even correspondence between government officials discussing the cover-up. This was the undeniable proof we needed. We spent the next few days meticulously organizing and scanning the contents of the box. Our goal was to create a comprehensive, easily accessible package that could be shared widely. We contacted a few journalists known for their integrity and commitment to uncovering the truth. With their help, we planned a coordinated release of the information to maximize its impact. As we prepared to go public, the surveillance around us intensified. Unmarked cars were a constant presence, and we received more veiled threats. But the sense of impending danger only strengthened our resolve. Finally, the day arrived. With the help of our journalist allies, we released the files online, sending them to major news outlets and sharing them across social media platforms. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The public was captivated by the evidence, and the story quickly went viral. The government's initial attempts to discredit the information were futile. The evidence was too compelling, too widespread to be dismissed. Pressure mounted for a formal investigation, and whistleblowers from within the project began to come forward, corroborating our findings. As the truth came to light, the menacing presence that had loomed over us gradually faded. The unmarked cars disappeared, and the threatening calls stopped. It seemed that the forces trying to suppress the truth had realized they were fighting a losing battle. In the end, Mark's legacy was secured. His relentless pursuit of the truth had exposed one of the greatest cover-ups in history. While the journey had been fraught with danger and uncertainty, it had also shown the power of determination and the importance of standing up for what's right. Alex and I returned to our normal lives, forever changed by the experience. We knew that there were still many unanswered questions and mysteries out there, but we also knew that the truth, once revealed, had a way of changing the world. As I look back on the events that unfolded, I realized that the journey was not just about uncovering a conspiracy. It was about the power of truth and the courage it takes to seek it. And that, above all, is what makes our story worth telling.